I'm Camille. He'd hit me, hard enough to leave its ugly signature beneath my eye. My parents, they saw it. Their eyes landed right on the mark, then slid away, averted. He, sprawled in the armchair, just laughed. Polite little family you've got here, he drawled. That night, solitude was my only companion. I sat silent, small, bruised, but I lit a candle, a tiny act of defiance. 30 minutes crawled by. Then the click of the lock echoed again. But this time, I wasn't the one who stayed down. Before we continue, have you ever swallowed your voice to maintain the peace, only to discover it cost you everything? Drop a comment. What time is it where you are? And would you have stood up the moment? The knock. The sound stiffened my body, not with fear, but with the dull ache of habit. I remained on the couch, a damp towel pressed to the tender, angry skin beneath my left eye. I hadn't cried, not even once. Crying just amplified the pain, made it boom in my chest. Silence. Silence was a tightly wound bandage. The door opened before I could even rise. My parents let themselves in, as they always did. No warning, just the rustle of grocery bags and the familiar, decades-old scent of fabric softener and soap clinging to their clothes. I turned my head slightly, just enough to acknowledge them. That was all it took. My mother froze mid-step, the plastic grocery bag clutched in her trembling hands. My father's eyes narrowed, not with shock, but with a cold calculation. He was measuring something, though I couldn't discern if it was me or the bruise blossoming across my cheekbone. No one spoke. Behind me, the television droned, a forgettable sitcom rerun punctuated by canned laughter. It clashed violently with the thick silence that now sat in the room like smoke. And then, like clockwork, Colton emerged from the hallway, shirtless, a half-empty beer clutched in his hand. He leaned against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, would you look at that? The polite little family's back. He didn't even bother with pretense. He didn't hide the smugness, the glint of control that shone in his eyes. My father gave a stiff nod. My mother averted her eyes completely. They both walked into the kitchen, placing the grocery bags gently on the counter, as if staging a photograph for a magazine. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. And then they walked out, not a word exchanged. The door clicked softly behind them, more like an exhale than a goodbye. The clock ticked loudly after that, or maybe it just felt that way. Colton belched behind me and plopped into the recliner like a man who had nothing left to prove. The chair groaned under his weight. I didn't turn to look. I already knew what I'd see. His stomach rising and falling with each slow breath, his eyelids heavy, the smug satisfaction still curling at the corners of his mouth. My fingers touched the bruise again, this time not to soothe, but to remember. The truth was, it hadn't started today. It never did. 2 hours earlier, I'd finally said it out loud. Stop treating me like I'm something you bought at a discount store, I snapped. Colton had been halfway through his beer, standing in the kitchen. He didn't even flinch, just looked at me like I was interrupting his show. You done? He asked, his voice flat. I'm serious. That was all it took. The slap came so fast I didn't even get to flinch. My ear rang. I stumbled, landed hard against the counter edge. The air left my lungs in a single gasp. I blinked up at him, and he apologized just like that. Hand out. Voice softened. Babe, Come on. You always push. You always got to make it a thing. I don't remember nodding, but I know I didn't argue. Back in the living room, the recliner hissed as he shifted his weight, already drifting into a nap, like nothing had happened. The beer bottle tipped against his chest, balanced there by habit. The room smelled of cheap hops and whatever cologne he thought still worked. I stood slowly, walked into the bathroom, wiped the blood off my lip with toilet paper, didn't even flinch when the paper came back red. I looked in the mirror for a long while. The woman staring back looked tired, but she wasn't broken. I don't matter to them. I don't matter to him. But I exist, I said aloud. My voice didn't shake. I reached for my phone, opened a message thread labelled only with an initial, typed, "I'm ready," then deleted it, then typed it again. Sent. I didn't look for a reply. Didn't need one. Back in the living room, the sky had darkened. A cold breeze slid under the window pane, making the curtains stir like something was breathing just outside. 30 minutes passed, the kind of 30 minutes where the air thickens and your mind sharpens, and then click. The front door. Colton stirred, grunted, didn't get up. I rose quietly, walked to the door, and opened it. Rachel stood there. No coat, just a thick sweater and jeans. She held a plain black duffel bag in one hand, a brown folder tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back, face clean, calm. But her eyes were locked on mine, like we'd been waiting for this moment our whole lives. She didn't say hello, didn't smile. She just stepped inside and looked first at me, then at the Bruise, then at Colton. I gave the smallest nod. She set the duffel on the floor gently, the folder beside it. No words. I walked to the kitchen. The floor creaked beneath my bare feet. I picked up a small black envelope from the drawer, the kind you save for letters that don't need stamps. Colton stirred again, muttered something, cracked one eye open. I placed the envelope down beside his beer. He squinted. "What the hell is that?" he mumbled. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time that entire day, I didn't avert my gaze. I didn't back down. "Don't worry." No said softly. "It's not poison." I paused, but it might kill something else. He blinked, confused, reached lazily for the envelope, but his hand missed. I turned and walked down the hallway. The carpet muffled my steps. Friday followed silently, the duffel now slung over her shoulder. The door to the bedroom clicked shut behind me, and I let the silence say the rest. I didn't slam the bedroom door. I didn't even let it click shut. I eased it closed behind me like I was putting a baby down for sleep. Friday was already unzipping the duffel before I turned around. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and faint fear. Not mine, his. It was still clinging to the walls, even though he hadn't stepped foot in here in weeks. Friday placed the folder on the bed right beside a tightly rolled change of clothes, a new toothbrush still in its wrapper, and a black leather-bound notebook with tabs peeking out. I glanced at myself in the mirror above the dresser. The swelling had crept down from my eye, pooling into a dull bruise on my cheekbone. I pressed 2 fingers to it, not to soothe it, but to remind myself it was real. He'd done that, and my parents had seen me, and walked out. Friday pulled out a recorder the size of a lipstick. "Battery's fresh," she said quietly. Then she handed me the folder. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Every page was familiar. Every line was something I'd lived with in silence, a notarized power of attorney granting me sole control over shared accounts. Screenshots of Colton's online transfers, my money pulled without consent, funneled into some poker app with cartoon dice, incident reports I'd written but never dared submit, one from January, another from June, a third from just last week, each marked with the same red pen Friday kept in her purse. And then, tucked at the back, a lease, a tiny apartment 12 miles south, under her name but signed by me. "I paid the first 2 months," Friday said. "You don't owe me. I need you to know that." I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just flipped to the last page, then closed the folder and laid it flat on the bed. 2 weeks ago, we'd sat at the public library, pretending to browse cookbooks while she whispered, "You don't need this stuff to believe yourself, but the court does. His lawyer will." I'd asked her then why she was doing all this, why she was risking anything. And she looked at me like I was slow. "Because no one else is. Because I believe you. And because I'm not leaving you here to rot while they call it a marriage." That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and finally believed something I hadn't allowed myself to in years. I mattered to someone. Friday tapped her phone. "We've got one window. After that, he'll be watching every door, every message, every noise." I nodded. "He's already lost control. He just doesn't know it yet." Her hand disappeared into the side pocket of the duffel and came out holding a flip phone. "No apps, no tracking, just numbers and calls." She handed it to me. "He finds out," she whispered. "He'll flip this house upside down." My fingers curled around the phone. "Then we better move before the couch stops snoring." I meant it, half as a joke, but as if on cue. I heard the creak of wood just outside the door, the faint shuffle of feet, and the clink of glass on glass. The recliner had given him up, then silence, then footsteps. Colton was moving again. I cracked the door open just enough to hear. The front room was quiet, but I could feel the shift, the stillness before something broke. The envelope I'd left next to his beer was probably open by now. I could picture his face as he saw the statement, the red circles Friday had drawn, the numbers that didn't lie, the withdrawals, the dates, the little yellow sticky note I'd placed at the bottom. "You'll want a lawyer, not a beer." Friday nodded toward the hallway. Time. Before she could say more, we heard it, heavy steps storming toward the bedroom, but I didn't wait. I opened the door myself and stepped into the hall just as he raised his fist to knock. He froze mid-motion, caught off guard. His eyes were wide, pupils sharp. His lips parted like he was about to bark something, but nothing came. I held up my phone. "That envelope. That's the beginning. Not the end." He blinked, confused, then angry. His hand reached out and grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to try control. It wasn't fear I saw in him this time. It was panic, smeared with guilt. Before I could speak again, Friday stepped out behind me, her own phone already recording. "Let go of her," she said flatly. "This is already live." Colton released my wrist like it burned him. He stumbled back a step, eyes darting between us, searching for some footing that no longer existed. I took one step forward, shoulders square, face calm. "Smile, Colton," I said evenly. "You're finally on camera." He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. And that silence, it was louder than the slap. His face twitched when I said it. Not a blink, not a word, just a flicker, like a wire in his brain short-circuited for a split second. Then came the sound, not a fist this time, but something louder, desperate scrambling. "You set me up." He barked it, like a man trying to swat at smoke, realizing too late the fire was already under his feet. "You dragged your friend into our marriage." His chest rose and fell too fast. A frantic bellows. His voice cracked, a jagged blend of rage and disbelief. "You're trying to ruin me!" I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just watched Peace, who held her phone steady, angled slightly to the side, her other hand curled tightly around the strap of her duffel bag. She didn't speak either. No comfort, no warning, just presence. Colton circled like a caged dog, all restless energy and simmering fury. "This is entrapment. You know that, right? You can't just set someone up and record them like this." His voice now had that high, brittle edge, the kind that surfaced when he felt cornered, but still thought he could bluff his way out. He jabbed a finger towards the kitchen. "You brought a witness into our home to bait me." I finally spoke, my voice quiet and level. "I didn't bring a witness. I brought protection." His jaw twitched again, a telltale sign of his barely contained anger. "I swear to God. Miss, I'll call the cops myself. I'll tell them you've lost it. That you're violent, unstable. You broke into my email. You've been spying on me." I tilted my head, a silent challenge. "Good." He blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "What?" I walked to the coffee table, calm and unhurried, and picked up the manila envelope I'd placed there earlier. I handed it to him like a waitress presenting a bill. "I already called them. You'll want to be ready when they knock. That's what they're walking into." He pulled the flap open and froze. Inside was a stapled packet, dates, medical notes, photographs, a printed copy of the restraining order request Camille was filing with me at dawn, emblazoned at the top with emergency petition, domestic safety concern. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was weight. The weight of truth hitting a man used to throwing punches and walking away without consequence. He scanned the page. One hand dropped to his side, the other tightened on the paper, crumpling it slightly. For once, he was speechless. I took a slow step back, not out of fear, just to give the scene room to breathe. And in that breath, my mind drifted back. 2 months ago, I'd started writing down everything. Not because I planned this. I hadn't. I was just tired of doubting my own memory. There was the morning I woke up with a bruise behind my ear and no recollection of how it got there. So, I snapped a photo, uploaded it to a private folder I'd created under a fake cloud name, Rivertown Books, just in case. Then there was the night I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, while Colton banged on the door. I scribbled down what he'd said, every word. I sent it to Camille without even knowing why. Friday answered 2 hours later, "Keep documenting. I believe you." Those 4 words were heavier than any slap he'd ever dealt. Later, I got a nurse friend to notarize the ER visit where I said I'd slipped in the garage. She didn't ask questions, just hugged Miss a little longer than usual. And then there were the recordings, quiet ones like the voicemail he left last week when he'd been drinking. "No one believes you anyway. Her. I'm the one with a job. I'm the one who takes care of things. You're just here." You're nothing. That voice, flat and cruel, was now my safety net. Back in the living room, Colton tried again. You know what people are going to think. You're the one obsessed. You're the unstable one. I'll tell everyone you were tracking me. You're paranoid. I didn't answer with words. I opened the recorder app on my phone, turned up the volume, and pressed play. His voice filled the air like smoke seeping under a door. You're so stupid it hurts. You think you matter, but you're property. You're nothing but a burden I'm stuck with. Camille didn't blink, just stared at him, expression unreadable. He flinched, his face drained of colour. He looked smaller, weaker, like a kid caught stealing but still thinking he could blame someone else. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge and the tail end of his own voice echoing from the speaker. Then came the faint flicker of red and blue light through the blinds. Colton spun toward the window. You actually called them. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I walked to the front door slowly. My hand found the doorknob. I paused, breathed in. Then I said, almost kindly, let's see if you still smirk in a mugshot. The knock wasn't loud, but Colton's voice behind it broke like glass, panicked, rising with that shrill edge I'd heard too many times before. She's setting me up! Don't believe a word! She's got her friend hiding in the kitchen with a camera! By the time the two officers stepped into view, their flashlights flicking across the hallway, Colton had already backed towards the staircase, hands lifted high in a gesture of innocence, so rehearsed I could almost see the cue cards behind his eyes. She ambushed me, he said quickly. She's unstable. She's been acting strange for weeks. She's trying to ruin my life. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped aside and gestured towards the kitchen table where I'd neatly arranged the folders, tabbed, dated, signed. The USB Friday handed over landed in the officer's palm with a soft click. You'll want to start with the timeline, I said. One of the officers, a younger man with a high and tight haircut and a sharp jaw, flipped open the top file. The other, a woman, maybe in her 50s, glanced at Camille, then at Miss. You did all this yourself? She asked, almost like it surprised her. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. The younger one gave a low whistle as he scrolled through images on the USB. These are time-stamped, yes, and notarized. My voice stayed level. Colton, still half-shadowed by the stairs, laughed. It was brittle, hollow. Wow, this is insane. She's staging an entire production. The officer ignored him. The younger officer kept scrolling. They asked Colton to sit down. When he didn't, the younger one quietly unclipped his radio and muttered a code I didn't catch, but it made Colton's shoulders drop. Slowly. He sat. By the time the sun crept over the tree line behind our house, we were in two separate cruisers headed for the precinct. I rode with the older officer, her nameplate reading Brenly, the leather of the back seat cold through my jeans. At the station, Camille and I were separated. She shot me a quiet look before they led her down another hallway. I was ushered into a pale green interview room with no windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera humming quietly in the corner. Officer Brenly returned alone and shut the door gently behind her. You know, she said, pulling out a notepad. It's rare to see someone come in this prepared. No. I didn't smile. No. I didn't prepare to fight. No. I prepared to be believed. She nodded slowly, eyes studying mine like she was deciding what kind of woman No was. We went through the files. She asked questions. I answered them without tears. I'd already cried in every room of that house. I didn't have any left for the station. Across the hallway, I could hear Colton's voice, loud, aggressive, familiar. When Officer Brenly excused herself, a man in a grey suit entered the room opposite mine, Colton's attorney. He'd arrived too quickly, which meant he'd been on standby, probably sent by Colton's father, a retired judge in Forsyth County. The shift in energy was immediate. When Brenly came back, her demeanour had cooled. The questions got sharper, less about what happened, more about why Node kept it to myself for so long. So she said, tapping the affidavit. You didn't go to the police until today. Why now? No, didn't wait. No said quietly, reaching into the folder for one last document. No documented and no warned someone months ago. No slid the affidavit across the table. It was signed by my therapist, dated 6 months back. In it, she noted the risk of escalation, specifically naming Colton. The last paragraph read, Client shows reasonable fear for her safety in the marital home. Should incidents escalate, she is encouraged to take legal protection measures immediately. Brenly read it twice. Still, she asked the question I'd feared the most. You sure you're not just trying to get ahead in a divorce, property split, custody leverage? For a second, my hands did tremble, but No folded them tight in my lap. No knew what No looked like, calm, dry-eyed, spine too straight, not broken enough to seem real. No answered plainly. If I'd waited for things to get worse, someone would have blamed me for not coming sooner. If No come now, they say I'm calculating. So No prepared, because No knew no one would hand me the benefit of the doubt. She didn't respond, just scribbled something down. My mind drifted, just for a moment, to a night 3 months ago in my therapist's office. The room lit soft and warm, while the world outside felt colder than bone. Node asked her, almost whispered, if I leave and no one helps, and he kills me anyway. Will they say I was crazy for staying? She'd put her pen down then, looked at me then. Then don't leave in a way they can forget. That night, No started planning, not to punish Colton, to make sure I lived. Back in the room. Officer Brenly rose and said she'd be back in a few. I waited, counted the slow tick of the wall clock. When she returned, she exhaled first, an audible sigh, like she didn't want to say what came next. We're holding him for 24 hours, she said. After that, it gets more complicated. No nodded. She handed me a clipboard with my restraining order documents. No signed without hesitation. No ceremony, no relief. Just steps, one after another. Outside. The sky had turned a washed-out grey-blue. The morning chill bit at my skin, but No didn't shiver. Camille met me at the bottom of the station steps. Her eyes searched mine. Did they listen? No nodded, then turned toward the lot where my car was parked. That, No whispered to myself as I slid into the driver's seat, was the easy part, because the hard part was telling my mother what happened and hearing her say nothing. The silence in the car ride back to the rental was thicker than anything the police station had offered. Not heavy like fear, just weighted. Like the air around us was tired too. Camille parked along the curb outside the modest unit Node rented on short notice. The kind of place you don't plan to stay in long. Thin walls, beige everything. The kind of kitchen that made you reach for takeout menus without even opening the fridge. No turned the key. The door clicked. And that sound, so small, was the first real breath I'd taken all day. We stepped inside. Camille helped me carry the last of the bags in. Neither of us said much. She'd stayed beside me since dawn, through the report, the processing, the emotionless bureaucracy of it all. Now, here we were, 2 women in a room full of someone else's furniture. She unfolded the spare blanket on the worn-out couch. "You want me to stay?" No shook my head. No need to do this one thing alone. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she knew this part wasn't about safety or comfort, but something else. Something No had to face with my own voice. After she left, No stood in the middle of that apartment, unsure of what to do with my hands. They felt like they were still holding something. Maybe fear, maybe memory. No sat down at the little kitchen table, the kind with plastic veneer peeling at the edges. Reaching for my phone, my fingers traced the worn edges. My thumb hovered over her name. Miss. It was always just saved as that. Not Mother, not Janie, not home, just Miss. I tapped it. It rang. And my heart didn't race the way it used to when I was in trouble as a kid. It didn't pound like when Colton used to yell. It just ached. A deep, hollow kind of yearning that had lived in me for decades. She picked up. No. Her voice was careful, not worried, not warm, just level. "I just wanted you to know," I said. "He's been arrested." Pause. "For what?" Her voice was flat. I swallowed. "For what he's done to me." She didn't say anything. I kept going. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear myself say it out loud to someone who knew me before I ever knew fear. The bruises, the hospital visits, the money he took, the screaming. I thought maybe you saw something. I thought maybe you'd come back. Another long pause. No. Marriage isn't perfect. No. But airing your laundry like this, we raised you stronger than that. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. That was it. That was her answer. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel the sting in my chest until several seconds later, because that was the moment I realised I'd been carrying the wrong hope. I set the phone down, didn't hang up, just let it sit there on the table, her voice still humming in the background, then fading, then gone. I opened my journal, the one Friday gave me months ago, back when she started noticing the quiet in my eyes. I wrote slowly. Today, I buried the last illusion. I don't need her to understand. I just need to stop needing her. I closed the journal. Across the room, my envelope. The envelope peeked out from my purse, the one I'd carried into the precinct full of records, photos, statements, the one I never thought I'd use. I pulled out a clean folder from the drawer and slid the envelope inside. Then I labelled it in black marker, closure. The sun had dipped by now. Shadows crept long across the carpet, the kind of light that makes everything look quieter than it feels. I made tea, something warm to hold, not to drink. I sat back on the couch, letting the steam rise and curl into the air. My body still remembered where every bruise had been, but I didn't flinch anymore. That's when the knock came. Not harsh, just 2 sharp taps. I stood, opened the door. Friday. Her face was pale, eyes wide. Not from fear, from disbelief. You need to see this. She brushed past me and grabbed the remote from the coffee table, flipping on the tiny mounted TV above the counter. A local news broadcast. There he was, Colton, in a button-down shirt, not even wrinkled, like nothing had happened. His lawyer stood off to the side, nodding along as he spoke. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Colton said into the microphone. "My wife? No? She's struggling emotionally. It's been a hard time. I just want her to get the help she needs." "Help?" Friday looked at me. I didn't blink. I just watched. He smiled for the camera, and something inside me stopped shaking. I walked back to the table, opened my laptop, sat down. Friday tilted her head. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I pulled up a blank document, and I started typing a letter, not to the police, not to a judge, but to someone who actually had power, someone with reach, with platform, someone who, once they saw what I had, couldn't unsee it. When I was done, I read it once, just once. Then I hit send, because that night I didn't cry. I drafted a letter and sent it to someone who had far more reach than a local cop. By the time the streetlights had faded into early grey, I was still awake. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. My body hadn't asked for sleep. It had asked for truth, and I gave it that. Now I sat at the tiny kitchen counter, hunched over my laptop, the screen dimmed, but alive. I sipped from a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My hands didn't shake. Not from fear. Not anymore. I wasn't hiding anymore. The email was open. Addressed to Peace Carrington, a journalist I'd never spoken to, but had been watching for weeks. Her face had come on my screen one sleepless night, reporting on a woman who exposed her husband, a state senator, and survived not just the scandal, but the shame. Her story rewrote state law. That night, I had bookmarked Peace's name. Now, I typed under it. "Dear Peace, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I'm going to give you every reason to..." I attached everything. The copies of the money transfers Colton made in my name, the audio files I'd recorded months ago back when my instincts still whispered, "You're not safe." The photos I took, the first bruise, the receipts, the text threads with his threats hidden between casual lines. I included a full timeline, the police statement, my name, and then I wrote one last sentence and reread it twice before sending, "If I disappear, this is my voice. Publish it anyway." I hit send. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, staring out the small kitchen window. The sky was turning from steel to pale peach. Somewhere down the block, someone was dragging trash bins to the curb. Life outside hadn't changed. But something in me had. I hadn't cried last night, and I wasn't going to now. But my breath came deeper, slower, like I had finally exhaled something I'd held for too long. I stood. I walked to the bathroom, flicking on the light. I faced the mirror. The bruise beneath my left eye had begun to yellow, looking like overripe fruit. For a moment, I reached up and gently brushed it with my fingertip. "You're not my shame anymore," I whispered. It didn't sound powerful, but it sounded honest. My phone buzzed on the counter, an email notification. I rushed over and opened it. From Elisa Carrington. Subject: Ristori submission. Body: This will not be buried. I'll call you in an hour. That's when I allowed myself a small smile. I set down the coffee and rinsed my face in cold water, then returned to the laptop to wait. I didn't pace. I didn't second guess. I just sat there, my heart steady. 45 minutes later, the Zoom link arrived. I clicked. Her face appeared, sharp eyes, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept, but she also looked like someone who didn't waste time. "Camille," she said. "Thank you for trusting me." "I wasn't sure I should," I replied. Honest. "Good. You shouldn't trust easy," she said. "But you trusted smart." She verified everything, every document, every timestamp, every voice file. She didn't rush me, didn't coddle me. She just listened and cross-checked. It felt less like being interviewed and more like passing a relay baton to someone ready to sprint. But nothing prepared me for what she said next. "You're not the only one." I blinked. "What?" "There's another woman. Different state. Same man. Different name. But same pattern. I'll connect you two if you want." My stomach dropped. Colton. He'd done this before. Another woman had once sat where I sat, told the same story to a wall of silence. And now we were both surfacing, gasping, maybe finally being heard. I nodded slowly. "Yes, please." We ended the call, and she promised to publish by Monday. I closed my laptop. My hand hovered for a second before letting the screen drop shut with a soft click. Just as I was about to stand, the burner phone I kept for emergencies buzzed beside me. A text lit up the screen from an unknown number. "You've made a mistake. Fix it or I will." I stared at the message, didn't move, didn't flinch. Then I said aloud to no one. No, I just finally corrected one. I left the phone on the counter. I wasn't going to live in fear of it because, for the first time in a very long time, my voice wasn't alone. And by Sunday, I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. And I wasn't the only one building a storm. By Sunday, I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. And I wasn't the only one building a storm. I zipped up my jacket against the late morning chill and walked through the side door of the old community centre off Mason Street. It still smelled like chalk dust and burnt coffee from the AA meetings that used the space at night. I passed a wall lined with flyers, self-defence workshops, grief circles, immigration support groups, and found the room Elisa had reserved for us. The folding chairs groaned as I sat down. Across the chipped laminate table, two women looked up, Dana and Alana, both older than me by a few years, both with faces that wore more than makeup. We greeted one another, not like survivors, but like strategists. That was Elisa's doing. Elisa had called us individually on Friday. She'd said, "You're not the only one. There's more, and it's time you met." Donna's voice broke the quiet first. "We're not here to swap war stories, right?" "No," I said. "We're here to change the pattern." She nodded. Her hands were firm on a thick folder, the corners worn. "Financial manipulation," she said simply. He forged my signature, rerouted business accounts under his name, left me with the IRS breathing down my neck. Alana added, "He isolated me. No credit in my name." When I pressed charges, they said I didn't seem scared enough first time. Second time, the DA dropped it in the interest of preserving family stability. I leaned forward. What we have now, it's not just stories, it's receipts. Alana slid over a thumb drive. Dana unfolded printouts and spreadsheets. I opened my laptop and pulled up the shared drive Elisa had set up, secure, encrypted, and under a decoy name. We each uploaded our documentation, bank statements, hospital records, texts, photos, police dismissals. Every time the system looked away, we saved the moment. That afternoon, we launched something small but solid, a private website, just a single landing page with 3 names, 3 testimonies, and 1 statement. We are not asking for justice. We are showing you the proof you refuse to see. My final upload was an audio clip, Colton's voice, low and mocking. Even if you scream, no one's listening. I typed a caption beneath the audio file. We heard each other. That was it. No hashtags, no drama, just reality. Around 4 p.m. I drove back to my apartment. The wind had picked up a little, as if the air itself knew something was shifting. I stopped by the corner market, picked up some pasta and 2 frozen lemon bars. I'd never liked them much, but they were my mum's favourite. Maybe I just needed to remember someone used to care. Or maybe I was preparing for the kind of closure you don't find in courtrooms. Back home. I plugged in my phone and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled up the news site Elisa worked with. A draft headline sat in her final review folder. The hands behind the silence. 3 women, 1 man, and the system that let him roam. The words stared back at me like something sacred and dangerous all at once. I pressed a palm flat against the tabletop to ground myself. My other hand reached up, almost without thinking, to the fading bruise under my right eye. Still there, faint and yellowed now, but a memory all the same. I whispered, "You're not the shame anymore." Then I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Colton had posted a photo from our wedding day. I was in lace. He was in navy. The caption read, "No one knew her like I did. I didn't flinch and I didn't even blink." He was baiting me, playing to his audience, family, friends, former co-workers, church women who still thought he was charming. He wanted a reaction. Instead, I gave him silence and something better. I pulled up my own photos, found the one I'd kept locked away in a cloud folder for years, a close-up shot of my hospital wristband, the date clearly visible. It was from the night I was admitted after a fall down the stairs. 1 year before our wedding, Colton had driven me there himself and told the nurse I was clumsy. I posted the photo without a caption. Just the truth. Plain, ugly, undeniable. And then I logged out. The wind rattled the window panes around 7:30. I made dinner, barely tasting it, and stood by the counter, staring into the steam rising off the pot. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel angry either. What I felt was something steadier, something heavier, like the weight of finally standing up straight after years of hunching to survive. Before heading to bed, I walked through the apartment and double-checked the locks. I knew the article was scheduled to go live Monday morning. I knew we had less than 24 hours before it wasn't just whispers between survivors. It would be public, and people would have to choose where they stood. Just before midnight, I lit a candle I hadn't touched since moving in. My therapist once told me that rituals matter when you're reclaiming space. So I sat quietly in the living room, candle flickering in the corner, and whispered, not to God, but to myself. Whatever comes, I'm ready. The article went live at 7:02 a.m. I didn't have to scroll far. Elisa's piece was pinned at the top of every news page I opened. By 9 a.m. My phone buzzed with a call from Colton's attorney. And by 9:15, another alert came through, this time from his firm. They weren't vague about it either. Termination review initiated. Confidentiality lifted. We'll be issuing a public statement within the hour. That sentence sat there on my screen as I stood barefoot in the kitchen, a lukewarm mug of tea untouched beside the sink. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I was simply breathing. I didn't forward the email. I didn't rush to post it online. I just exhaled, the quietest sound I'd made all morning. But it carried the most weight. I went about my day as normal as I could. I folded laundry, fed the cat, wiped the edge of the windowsill with my sleeve where dust had settled. Every now and then, I checked my phone, not obsessively, but enough to watch the digital current swell. The comments were flooding in beneath the article, some praising Elisa's reporting, some sharing their own truths, but it was the private messages that stopped me cold. One was from a name I didn't recognise, a woman named Camille. She wrote, "I read the article. I was one of his patients. Thank you for not staying quiet." I sat down at the table, not because I felt weak, but because my knees trembled in a different way. Not fear, something more like release. By noon, another number appeared on my screen, a different law office. I hesitated, but answered. "Mercier." The voice on the line was calm, measured, a woman. "My name's Taryn Everett. I'm with the Fulton County DA's office. I wanted to let you know we're reopening your case." I didn't reply immediately. My mind blanked, like it didn't know how to compute that sentence. Taryn continued gently. "I'm sorry it took this long. There were procedural barriers. But now that certain pieces have surfaced publicly, particularly the audio, those barriers no longer apply. I could have said 1,000 things. I could have asked why it had to take an article, a social storm, a wave of strangers, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, "Thank you for catching up." And she understood exactly what I meant. We scheduled a formal statement for Thursday. After I hung up, I found myself walking into the bedroom. The closet door stood slightly open. I pulled it wide and stepped inside, like I had months ago, back when my only form of truth was a whisper between clothes racks and silence. I remembered it clearly. The phone clutched against my chest, my voice barely audible. "I'm recording this just in case," I'd said that day. That audio was now embedded at the end of Elisa's article. And now, according to Taryn, it was also logged into the official courthouse file. From my pocket, my phone buzzed again. I walked back to the kitchen and unlocked it, half expecting another message of support. But it wasn't that. It was Colton. He had just uploaded a video. No edits, no background music, just his face. Messy hair, eyes red, voice shaking. "They're painting me like a monster," he said. "She's making it sound like I'm some kind of abuser. I loved her. I still do. But this is cruel. She's not the woman you think she is. She's vengeful." I watched in silence, not because I was shocked, but because I could finally see through the performance. I used to mistake that voice, the fragility, the cracks, for regret. But now it just felt like someone desperately trying to pull a mask back on, even after it had already hit the floor. beneath his post. The comments were a mix at first, but then... "One took off," Camille replied. "She didn't break the silence. She survived it. That's louder." It was shared over 30,000 times before the hour was up. Sunday closed the video, set her phone down again. It was only mid-afternoon when the next notification arrived, a legal one this time. Protective order expanded. Defendant is required to surrender all registered firearms by 10 Tyler tonight. Sunday reread it once, then again, slowly. The timestamp matched the motion. He'd been served. Sunday leaned back in her chair, watching a thin beam of light stretch across the floor from the window. Her tea was cold. Her cat was curled up in the same patch of sun he always claimed. And for the first time since all of this began, the air around her felt still. Sunday said it quietly out loud, more to the walls than to anyone in particular. "We're not done, but now we're not invisible either." There was no anger in her voice, just truth. And truth, when it finally has space to exist, doesn't need to scream. That night, Sunday lit a piece, not for grief, but for something she'd forgotten she deserved. Peace. A week later, as the sun dropped behind the city skyline, Sunday stood outside the courthouse again. Same steps, same wide doors, but her knees didn't shake this time. In her hands, she held a sealed manila folder, the last of the paperwork. It wasn't heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. It might as well have been made of stone. Her request to finalize the divorce, to let the protective order stand until the judge handed down a sentence. But that wasn't the reason Sunday came tonight. Sunday wasn't here to file papers. Sunday was waiting. A breeze moved her coat as she watched cars ease past on the road. Evening traffic, horns low, radios. The occasional burst of laughter from a sidewalk cafe across the street. The courthouse loomed behind her, quiet now, its last clerk locking up the side entrance. Then headlights turned into the lot. The car rolled to a stop, and Friday stepped out first. She didn't wave. She just looked at Sunday like she was already understood. Dana followed, coat sleeves pushed up, her expression calm but tired. Behind her, Alana. She carried nothing but a small candle in her hand. It was unlit. They didn't need words. They'd used so many already in months of late-night calls, hushed confessions, and courtroom benches. They stood beside Sunday like pillars. "I came here alone once," Sunday murmured. "I leave with sisters now." Friday squeezed her arm. Dana gave a half smile. Alana simply nodded. The last of the sunlight kissed the horizon in orange and lavender. They stood there, 4 women facing a building that once echoed with silence. Hours. Sunday turned, folder still in hand, and they walked in together. Inside. The corridor was dim. Fluorescent lights flickered above. The clerk at the front desk didn't even look up. Sunday approached, handed over the envelope. He asked, "Final filing?" Sunday nodded. "Yes." He stamped the form. No cameras, no crowd, no lawyers, no Colton, just the sound of paper sliding into a metal tray. "Anything else?" he asked. "No, that's all." The walk back outside was quiet. When Sunday pushed open the glass doors, the air felt fresher, cooler on her skin, sharper in her lungs. Sunday stood there a moment longer, breathing. Across the street, a couple walked by arm in arm, mid-conversation. A little boy chased a pigeon on the courthouse lawn. Life kept moving. Even when yours felt paused, it never really stopped. Dana reached into her coat and pulled out a thermos. "Ta," she offered. "Shamil." Sunday accepted a sip. Still warm, familiar. "I remember the first time I called you," Alana said. "You sounded small, not weak, just hidden." Sunday replied. Hiding felt safer. There was a pause. Then Friday added, "But you still picked up the phone." That moment settled deep because that was it. Wasn't it? Sunday didn't scream. Sunday didn't break down in public. Sunday didn't throw anything or fight him in front of witnesses. Sunday just picked up the phone, whispered, documented, waited, and then moved. Sunday blinked back, and suddenly it was all there. The first Bruise Sunday covered with makeup, her mother's eyes, how they dropped to the floor instead of meeting hers. Colton's voice after the first apology, "You made me do that." The sound of a lock clicking and no one coming back. And finally, Miss alone in the closet, one hand trembling, whispering into her phone. "My name is Miss. I'm scared, but I'm done pretending I'm not." Then that clip made it into the article and into the court file. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Sunday exhaled slowly and looked up at the courthouse windows. Sunday imagined someone behind the glass reading her file now. Maybe a young lawyer, maybe a judge, maybe just another clerk. And maybe they'd pause, not out of pity, but because they heard a woman who didn't yell, didn't perform, but survived. Sunday turned to the others. "I'll walk home." "You sure?" Friday asked. Sunday nodded. "I need the air." They didn't argue. They just hugged her, one after the other. No fanfare, no final speech. As they pulled away, Alana pressed the unlit candle into her hand. "For your window," she said, "in case someone's still out there waiting to believe it gets better." Sunday walked the rest of the way with the candle tucked in her coat pocket. The streets glowed amber under street lamps. Her steps felt lighter, not free maybe, but no longer chained. When Sunday reached her apartment, she unlocked the door, slipped off her shoes, and moved through the rooms without turning on every light like before. The place wasn't big, but it was hers, and quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hides. Bruises, the kind that allowed a release of breath, that's what they were. I stood by the window, the very same one I'd gazed out of on the night he didn't return, and the countless nights I'd wished he wouldn't. I ignited the candle. Its tiny flame danced gently against the glass, emitting just enough light to be noticed from the street below. And then I whispered, not to the room, not to him, but perhaps to someone as I once was. There are bruises no one perceives. There are silences that sever more profoundly than fists. But there exists something else too, a form of healing that doesn't seek permission. I didn't stir for a long while, just remained there, watching the candle diminish, and in its faint glow, I didn't see what I'd lost.